Hello out there, delhs community. Welcome to the 2022-2023 season premiere of Holding Court with me, your host, Chris Stevens, founding editor of First State Hoops Report. Hopefully you all are doing well out there. It is a rainy Sunday as we are recording this. Hopefully y'all are staying dry out there, staying cool. Well, actually staying warm. You want to stay warm this time of year. You don't want to stay cool. This is our season opening episode. We're already 10 days into the season, and there's a lot of interesting basketball that has gone on. And there's going to be some interesting basketball moving forward. So we definitely wanted to get a podcast going. This is our best stab at a podcast because 9 times out of 10, we're too busy to just sit down and just do one for days on end. I actually want to shout out John Busby and Marty Sheehan of the Delaware High School Football Podcast, originally the Delaware Sports Debate. They had me on at the end of last year, recapping the regular season, previewing the state tournament, previewing the state championship games, and I wanted to get back into podcasting for delhs and for First State Hoops Report. I just didn't have the time or didn't really think about it that much. Then I remembered I had done 2 episodes of Holding Court before. So I was like, well, let's just make Holding Court a weekly thing. Twitter Phil asked me if I was going to do a basketball podcast, and I said, sure, why not? If y'all want to hear me talk about basketball for 30 minutes at a time each week, let's go for it. So we're going to go for it. I want to talk about one thing off the rip before I start getting into the nuts and bolts of the season and, who I feel are the top teams and all of that. And let's get into lists and why they exist. This is New Media 101. I'm your professor, Professor Stevens. Welcome to class. Okay, so there has been a list going around that has caused a lot of consternation, shall we say, in the basketball community here in Delaware. The top 35 as published by the News Journal last week for boys and girls. And I'm going to give you guys some game on what media is or isn't in the 21st century. Now, if you're not familiar with the News Journal is owned by a parent company, Gannett. And Gannett, if you haven't been noticing in the news, is laying folks off left and right. The media industry is just not as plentiful for jobs as it used to be. That's part of the reason First State Hoops Report exists, because I freelanced for the News Journal from 2014 to, I want to say 2021. Yeah, because I was actually Brad asked me if I wanted to do football this year, and I was like, you know what? I got this new job. I'm exhausted. I need my Friday nights to myself until basketball season starts. So I'm going to punt on this one. But Brad has always been kind enough, if work was needed, he would give it to me. Shout out to him. Andre Smith, who of course now is head part of new media over UD. Rest in peace, Jason Levine. God, one of the greatest people in our industry. If you didn't know Jason Levine, man, you missed out. Sorry, just had to get that off my chest. Anyway, so yes, for 7 years, I was a News Journal freelancer for high school football, basketball, wrestling, lacrosse, volleyball. Whatever the News Journal needed myself and a few other freelancers to do, we did it. Then the budget dried up around 2017. So they cut us back to football. And then after a while, things just started going south for the media industry. And that's not just a News Journal problem. That is a nationwide problem. There are too many cooks in the kitchen, shall we say, with respect to people who own media conglomerates. And a lot of the people that own media conglomerates don't know a doggone thing about news or media or deadlines or anything like that. Like, people think because something in the News Journal is a typographical error, it's a problem of the office in Delaware. No, it is a problem of the office in Iowa. Just something to think about. That's one thing. Number one. Number two, clicks and views are how people get paid today. Those are the facts. So yes, people are upset that this player was ranked too low. This player was ranked too high. This player wasn't ranked at all. And you have to remember that there's one high school sports reporter at the News Journal. That's Brad Myers, who does an excellent job, by the way. There are 3 full-time sports reporters. The legendary Kevin Tresolini, who has covered sports in Delaware since, I was in diapers. And he does University of Delaware. And Martin Frank, who covers the Eagles. Those 2 gentlemen are very, very busy. Brad Myers is very, very busy. So in order to keep the operation going, you have to sort of farm your stuff out to people who are in the know. And Brad asked for coaches specifically. I mean, I'm not telling all of his business, but it's on the list that coaches were asked. And that's what a lot of coaches came up with as far as the order goes. So some coaches are obviously going to stump for their players more than they're going to stump for players on the other teams. Those are just the facts. So people who think that their kid, their homeboy, their homegirl, their road dog, their baby, whatever y'all call these kids today, is being slighted, it's not happening. Not purposely anyway. I mean, we all can go to games and see who's good, who needs a little work, who is just playing basketball. But at the same time, it's not a smear campaign. It is not a witch hunt. It is not anything malicious that anybody is doing when we come up with these rankings, especially for top 10s, for me, for basketball. Oh, my God. So many of y'all had problems with my top 10 at various points of the year last year for boys and girls basketball. And it's like, yo, I'm going to the games. I see the games. I see the teams. I see the players. I see the coaches. This isn't just something I'm pulling out of my head. I was going to say something else, another portion of my body, but I remember this is a PG-13 podcast and not my personal podcast, so I can't really be as off the cuff as I would like to be. But yes, this is not something that we're just pulling out. I'm just pulling out of nowhere. Like, going to the games, looking at the results, seeing who's playing, seeing who's not playing, see how the coaches are coaching, see how a game looks. And nobody is purposely saying that, we just going to totally disrespect this player, disrespect this team, disrespect this coach, just because, whatever gripes we may have or may not have. Because those don't exist. We wouldn't be doing our jobs if we just held personal agendas against any and everybody. So I want people to just, and I hate quoting Charlemagne the God because he's probably one of the most overrated media people ever, and he's really just a fraudulent person to begin with. But he does have a good point when he says you got to give humans grace. And we all need grace at some points in our lives. This isn't just a basketball thing. This isn't just a sports thing. This is a life thing. We don't know what people are dealing with. We don't know what stress people are under. And again, we're talking about kids. We're talking about 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. These are the same kids that when we were that age, we were worried about breakouts, fights in school, being bullied, failing this test, that test. They have those same concerns now. And it's amplified more because back in our day, really telling how old I am now, there was no internet. Well, I mean, there was internet, but it wasn't social media. Like, you couldn't reach out and just randomly comment on somebody's IG page that they suck or something like that. Or, the most we had was the rumor mill or slam books. If you're old enough to remember slam books, you will laugh at the remembrance of that because people literally ran around with these little notebooks writing insults about each other back in the mid and late 90s. So we didn't have social media, but we had slam books. But I think slam books didn't have as far of a reach as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok do today. So just give kids grace. Give the people that are covering the kids grace. It's high school sports. It's not the end of the world. We are not finding the cure for cancer. We are not solving the national debt. We are not forgiving student loans. Shouts out to the homeboy, President Joe Biden. I know you're still working on that. I just got a little thing from Navient in the mail the other day, and I'm still waiting on you. Still waiting on you, President Joe. I know you're going to come through. So, yeah, we are not doing like Nobel Peace Prize worthy work here. We are just covering kids playing a game. We should all do well to remember that. There's no sense in bashing this reporter or this coach or this media personality because they're calling it as they see it. Granted, there are some, well, we'll talk about that in another episode. I don't want to get too far off the beaten path, but there'll be some things that we'll discuss in terms of, media coverage in Delaware and how that has gotten to be a little, shall we say, oversaturated. We'll talk about that in another episode. That being said, basketball season, yes, the absolute reason for this show, mind you, is underway. We have I'm going to start with the girls because I feel like the girls has a lot of intrigue across the board. People will say, oh, you can predict who's going to be champion because it's only going to be 4 teams in the hunt. That could be true. And then again, it could be not. I can already tell you that, yes, you can probably place Sanford, Caravel, Ursuline in the Final Four, depending on how the brackets go, because Lord have mercy. There have been some, murderers row portions of brackets. Like the boys bracket last year on one side was just absolutely just like, whew, whoever made it out of there earned it. Like I think Middletown and Apple were on the same side. Dover and Smyrna were on the same. Dover and Seaford, were on the same side. It really depends, and that's why scheduling probably plays a role in how teams are ranked, and and how they're seated in the tournament more than just who has the best players, who has the best coaches, who had the most highlights. You got to play the game, and the game in Delaware is point index. If you're not familiar with the point index goes like this for the state tournament. Every win is worth 2 points. If you play a team over 500, that is 1 bonus point. If you play a team with a winning percentage of 70.1 or higher, that's 2 points. And you take that number of points, you divide it by the number of games played, and you get your point index. So people probably saw, since I'm talking about the girls, we're going to stick with the girls. People saw Stanford 19-2 or 18-2 in the regular season and say, well, dang, how did Caravel at 14-6 get a higher seed than them? Caravel and Kristen Caldwell's last year, I called that woman Kirsten. Sorry, coach. Kristen Caldwell played a murderer's row of a schedule last year. And that prepared her team for the tournament. And they earned that first seed. So you got to play the game. And that's why you'll probably see like Sally is scheduling teams from Newman Goretti to Roman Catholic or the Bullis School, teams out of state that have a reputation for collegiate level players and that are going to be, if not worth 1.3. So you just have to play the game. And a lot of coaches, give them credit. They know how to schedule. Some coaches schedule teams that hurt their point index. Others schedule to help. You might get your butt kicked in the short term, but in the long term, that's how you end up with maybe like a 11-9 team or a 12-8 team with a home game or a 13-7 with a first round bye or a top 5 seed. That's how you got to do it. That is how you have to do it. Okay, on to the girls now. I said I was going to start talking basketball. Sorry. When I get on tangents, y'all, please stop me. Just like say, Chris, you're talking too much about this one doggone thing. Just get to the games. Okay, getting to the games. Sanford. I did a feature on Zai Kilgo and Dallas Pierce, who are going to probably be 1 and 2 as far as like this whole first team all-state thing goes. But the entire Sanford team is pretty loaded for the most part. I feel like they didn't have any holes last year. The only thing that hurt them, literally, was Amaya Carroll getting hurt in the semifinals. Like that really just because she was their gadget player. She was their do everything. She could shoot, she could defend, she could rebound, she could pass. She ran the floor pretty well for a 6-foot guard. And that hurt Sanford. And Marcus Thompson's a guy that's not going to make excuses. So it's not like, you'll hear him crying about it. But, that really hurt them last year. But I think general health, if they stay healthy, Sanford probably is, the team to watch out for. They just have a little bit of everything, with Pierce, with Kilgo, with Zoe Kashner, with Jada Snow, who I don't think we've seen her best basketball yet. Like, she's playing forward, but every time I see a clip of her, she handles the ball just as well as Zion Dallas does. Marcus Thompson turns her loose, y'all got to pray. I'm telling you right now. Ursuline, of course, we know about Gigi and Tay. They are the 8th graders that everyone is going to be coming to see. And it looks like I am probably going to have to figure out a way to get to Ursuline that does not involve me driving. Even though I'm not that far from Ursuline, it's still it was a nightmare getting to games last year when they were the team of tomorrow. When people were like, okay, we're just waiting on Gigi and Tay to get here, but that team still made the Final Four as it was. It was hard getting parking to Ursuline then. It's definitely going to be hard to get the parking to Ursuline now. So you got to really plan ahead. If you know anything about that area of Wilmington, there are people who don't take kindly to visitors parking in front of their homes. So, and there's only that one little stretch leading up to Ursuline that you can park in, and that stretch fills up really quickly. So just be mindful. If you are trying to get to the Gigi and Tay show, you better get there early. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck. You're going to be stuck. Tatnall, meanwhile, they were the surprise Final Four team of last year. I don't think they'll be a surprise this year. Emma Kirby, I saw her play against AI on Thursday. She is the best post player in the state for girls without question. That's my opinion. And yes, people, if you want to get mad with me about that, you can. That's your choice. But I feel like, that was the difference in the game on Thursday. AI played really well for 2.5 quarters, but then Emma just took over and said, you know what? I'm grabbing every rebound. Give me this ball down here. I'm going to turn around and shoot over a player, which I have 3 or 4 inches of height on. I'm just going to be dominant. And when a player of that magnitude just says, I am taking over this game, we all know basketball. When somebody like that just says, here, there's not too much you can do about it. I don't care who you are. And of course, they still have Kaylee Clayton, Cherish Bryant, Bree Gauthier. That's a good team. They have a brand new coach. Shout out to Paul Smith. We didn't know Coach Smith had left from North Carolina until the school year started. I looked up and said, Coach Erica Brown? I was like, wait a minute, what happened to Coach Smith? Everybody was like, he went to North Carolina. I'm like, okay, cool. Good luck to Coach Smith. Shout out to him. But yeah, I feel like that Tatnall team, people kind of slept on them last year. I don't think that'll be the case this year. Caravel, we got to talk about defending state champs. Coach Caldwell is now coaching baseball, and we believe she is the first woman to coach high school baseball in the state of Delaware. Once again, she's a trailblazer. Like, they got to put a statue of that woman in front of that building at some point. I mean, she'll probably never want to cop to that because, she's a humble person. She prefers the spotlight to be on her kids in the school or whatever, but they got to put a statue of Kristen Caldwell. They got to put a statue of Kristen Caldwell in front of that building at some point. She is Caravel. Those are the facts. But she is now coaching baseball. And Larry Banks, a guy who I've known for a very long time. I was actually a public information officer at Delaware Tech when he was coaching Delaware Tech men's basketball, so we go way back. He also has coached at Wilmington University for the women. And he's going to have them pretty much close to where they were before. And it helps that, Speedy Wilson has come in from St. George's, Bryson Strickling, first-year guard who has tons of potential. You still got Josiah Crawford. You still got Anaya Price. You still got Janiyah Gale. Amaya Johnson's coming back from an ACL injury at some point, I would imagine. So we can't count Caravel out just yet. That's still going to be a very good team. Any other Final Four contenders? Because I named 4 off the rip. Sanford, Caravel, Ursuline, Tatnall. Archmere is one of those teams that will probably end up shocking a lot of people, but they shouldn't, because I feel like Dan Pisani does not get his flowers as one of the best girls high school basketball coaches of the last 15, 20 years, because it ain't too many of them left. With Coach Caldwell coaching baseball now, think about it. The longest standing ones are Marcus Thompson at Sanford, the great John Noonan in Ursuline, and Dan Pisani, who has won at 3 different schools. 3. You see these fingers? Never mind that crooked one. 1, 2, 3. He's made it to the Final Four at Appo. I was actually working for the Milltown Transcript when he was coaching at Appo. He had a great team with Amani Clark, who played at Lincoln, and Ashley Smith that played at Virginia Union. He won at Newark Charter, and he's winning now at Archmere. Like, Coach Pisani is a guy that, again, he'll never, just say, oh, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. But you have to be able to be a good coach to win with not the same amount of resources as, say, a John Noonan or a Marcus Thompson. And Dan Pisani has his teams in the state tournament every year. Just saying. Go see an Archmere game. They don't quit. I went to see them play against Appo last Monday, and I was so frustrated because I bought a brand new video camera and the SD card glitched at the worst possible time and reset, and I couldn't retrieve the video. It was a phenomenal game. I was so upset about that. But go see an Archmere girls game. They will have you on the edge of your seat even if you are not a Archmere fan. They just don't quit. And that's the sign of their coach, because he just will encourage them to push all the way through. One of the best games I saw last year was at Padua. and I know the couple of people that I've discussed this with off the record are going to see this and laugh, but Paddle was up 35-20 in the middle of the third quarter. You think, well, this game is going south pretty quickly for Archmere, but then all of a sudden they get a couple steals and a couple buckets. I'll never forget Lydia Scarpese, the senior guard. She had a steal. She got absolutely hammered going to the basket. Finished anyway. I said, yeah, Archmere is going to come back and win this one. And sure enough, they won it 45-42. So kudos to Dan Pisani. If you haven't gone to see an Archmere girls game yet, do yourself a favor. You will be intrigued throughout the duration of that game. Otherwise, around the state, you can pick a few teams that'll probably make some noise. AI's girls are going to be one. Lucky Price has a talented team. My Trader is probably going to be on the short list of first team All-State girls. Kimani Woods, Naisha Jackson, those are her two sidekicks, but they are capable of taking a leading role. Flight B doesn't look to be very challenging on the surface, but Curtis Clack does a great job at Howard. So don't just concede Flight B to AI just yet, because they still have to play Howard. And Clack always has his girls ready. Flight A, that one, it still feels like it's a two-team race to me. It's still between Apple and St. George's. Even though Speedy went from St. George's to Caravel, St. George still has Leah Richardson, Nia Mills, Diane Samuels. Apple is a team that I have watched probably more than any other girls team over the last few years. And it feels like they have the talent. It's just something that just keeps them from getting over the hump. And the Archmere game was Exhibit A. Like, they had a good scoring run going between Deja Martin and Kyla Reeder. For some strange reason, shots stopped falling, and then all of a sudden it was just like, where are we going? What are we doing? And they'll get it together. I don't have any doubt that they'll be one of the contenders for Flight A and probably a contender for a high seed. But you just have to be really just catch Apple on a good day. And you'll see that I feel that they're probably one of the top teams in the state when they get it together. I think that probably just about covers it. St. Elizabeth's, can't forget St. Elizabeth's. They're going with a new coach this year, Joe Peranti, a St. E alum, and he's still got a big three of Sydney Hilliard, Erica Higgins, and Farrah White. And those three were pretty good last year. It was just that Tatnall came in there in that quarterfinal, and I've been covering basketball in high school sports and sports in general for 20 years, 21 now, going on 21. I started as a student reporter covering Delaware State football in 2002. So yes, my career is older than anybody playing high school sports right now. When it was twinkling, when you kids were twinkles in your parents' eye, that's when my career started. That's funny. Shout out to my guy Artie from Dover. His son Cam is the starter on Dover's basketball team, and Artie just had a birthday, as a matter of fact. And it's so interesting. We talk about how old we are, but genetics and aging have a way of making people, it's a crapshoot. Like, Artie's a little bit older than me, and he has a head full of locks. I'm younger than him, and that train has left the station, never to return. So, yeah, that's just one thing about aging. We all get old at some point, and we all get old differently. But yes, what was my point again? Once again, off on a tangent. Sorry. But yeah, after doing this for as long as I have, you get the general sense that this year is going to be hard to predict from a girl standpoint because, yeah, there's 4 or 5 that you can place in a Final Four, but how will they all play against each other? That is the question. There's still a lot to like around the state as far as girls go. Red Lion has a good team. Cape Henlopen has a young team, but I like their young talent. I think, who else am I thinking of? Yeah, I think that's about it. I think those are the teams that you can probably just, Wilmington Charter still returns a lot. Go see a girls basketball game. Don't get all caught up in boys mania. We've discussed this in private. I've discussed it in private, with different reporters and different parents, that the girls seem to get slighted, not just in professional sports, but across the board. There's some good girls basketball teams here in Delaware. Treat yourself. You'll be glad you did. On to the boys now. And yes, it's really just, pick a team at this point. Yes, we have only played 2 games for the most part. We've only got a week into a 12-week season. But I can tell you now, if the injury bug and the report card bug doesn't hold up some teams, there will be at least 8 that you can probably say, oh, this team is capable of winning a state championship. Who are those 8? I'll tell you now. Number 1, Tower Hill, defending champs. Still have Dean and Dylan Shepard. Kevin Coleman, the first-year guard, is someone they highly think of as a potential piece that could probably help them down the line this season. Middletown is stacked. Coach Ali, who I went to Howard with, once again, this state is so small, we all run into each other at some point. We just do. Everybody in Delaware knows somebody. Kevin Bacon, there's 6 degrees of separation for Kevin Bacon, and there's only 2 in Delaware. Everybody knows everybody. But yeah, Coach Ali coaches a very frenetic, defensive-minded style that gives his guys out in the open to run. They're stacked. They have Jaden Rogers, Jaden McGee, Amir Cunningham, Marcus Edmond, Amir Height, Tyron Henson, who's going to be a D1 wide receiver in football. Pick a player. They'll get it done on a given night. Okay, so I said Tower Hill, Tatnall, Sanford. I really like Sanford still. Sanford getting Tommy Vaughn is huge because Tommy adds a different dimension from an athletic guard standpoint. Sanford hasn't had a guard like Tommy since Champ, Anthony Mosley Jr. And shouts out to Rob Turner, the assistant coach at Sally's, who made that point the other day when Tommy put that vicious put-back dunk down. He was like, yeah, that's real champ-like. That is real champ-like. So, Sanford's really good. I like Dover, too. Dover has young talent. And it's probably nothing new for Stephen Wilson to just be like, okay, you're going to plug this in, you're going to plug this in, you're going to plug this player in. And they didn't do too bad against Middletown. Foul troubles would hurt them. But against a team like a King's Christian Academy, which you should beat, they beat them bad. Like, literally, we all looking at each other like, why can't the running clock start in the second quarter? That's how bad it was on Saturday. And I know that certain rules are, I know for football it's halftime, and I know for basketball it's the fourth quarter, but you got to be honest with yourself at some point if you're an official. You got to say, hey, man, we got to do something about this. Like, look, we can't be here any longer than we have to. We already know what's going on. So that's just one person's opinion about the running clock. Could start earlier, is all I'll say. Howard, I still like Howard. Howard lost 2 or 3 big pieces, Demir Hollingsworth, Deontay Holland, and Darius Brown Jr., but they still return Aiden and Xavier Richards-Powell, Jameer DeShields, RJ Matthews. They got a lot of youngins on their JV that are probably going to move up at some point. Howard is stacked in the way that Middletown is stacked. They just don't have enough room on varsity for those kids right now. And it really depends on, how those kids take that, because kids respond to things in different ways. Coaches will tell them that this player can handle, waiting their turn. This player may need a little more of a quicker trigger. So Howard is tough. Seaford, of course. Seaford was my pick to win states last year. They were. And they made the Final Four, and they got caught up in that Tower Hill shooting display that lasted a good 60 hours. Like, I think the Nets at the Bob are still scorching from how well Tower Hill shot during that Final Four weekend. But Seaford still returns Brent Ricketts, who's probably the favorite for player of the year right now. Kashmir Wise, Kareem Bolden, the Matthews brothers. That's still a loaded team as well. Let's see, I said Tower Hill, Sanford, Howard, Middletown, Seaford, Salesianum, another loaded team with talent who just happened to be on the unfortunate end of Tower Hill's shooting display last March. That's still a very good team. Kareem Thomas, Isaiah Henson, got RJ Johnson coming in. That's a team. That's a scary team. Tukey Smith, the young point guard, he's going to get his minutes at some point. And once Coach Taylor Trevison gets more confidence in him, that is going to be a dangerous team all around. So you have at least 7 or 8 teams that can sneak up and win a state championship. Well, not necessarily sneak up, but those are the ones that you can pick on March 9th. Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, guys. In case you didn't notice, basketball's boys final is on a Thursday this year. So, yeah, if you planned on making a weekend of it, sorry. And I don't know why the final isn't on a Saturday, as it's been probably since 1967 when the state tournament first happened, but I don't know. And there's an interesting, there's one, I do want to talk about this because during the DIA meeting, Executive Director Donna Polk said that she wanted the boys, I think, and the girls, tournament to be home court based until the state championship game. And I don't want anybody to take this as being a shot at the Executive Director of DIA because it's not. I think she does a good job. So don't even try it. I'm not slandering anybody. I'm not coming for anybody's neck. I'm just going to gently rebuke this as a historian. Like the first Final Four that I went to was the one when the Bob Carpenter Center opened in 1993. Had a cousin playing for Glasgow. Glasgow ended up winning the state championship that year. We were walking into the building just as Sanford and Salesianum were heading into overtime. And we all know what happened at the end of that game. Salesianum guard, Brandon Buffon Sr. Once again, we're old because Brandon Buffon Jr. plays for Sally's now. We're old, people. So, yes, as an 11-year-old, watching him knock that shot down is the first memory of Delaware high school basketball that just uniquely belongs to me because my sister used to take me to Howard games when I was a toddler or kid. I didn't know too much about that. I mean, I was just there. You know, I was like a showpiece for my sister. So yeah, that first Final Four at the Bob was the first basketball memory that uniquely belongs to me as far as Delaware high school basketball goes, and that's 30 years ago. The Bob was made for the Final Four, and people who saw championship games and Final Fours at the Fieldhouse probably feel the same way. Like, and also back in the day, they had this beautiful thing called neutral site games. Yes. Before the advent of home court advantage in the state tournament, you would be playing in someone else's gym. Of course, you both would be playing in someone else's gym because nobody had home court advantage. Like, for example, you'd probably have like Newark versus St. Mark's at Middletown, or Middletown versus Dover at Smyrna, or Howard versus Cape Henlopen at Caesar Rodney. You know, that type of thing. Like, neutral site games made it more interesting, honestly, because nobody had one side or the other. You know, you had an equal amount of tickets that you sold per side, and yet you had, you know, opposing sides, but nobody literally had home court advantage because you were both driving from different locations to get there. So I'm not going to say that it's a bad idea. I'm just going to say that it takes the beauty out of what is the last unique state tournament in the United States of America. I think along with Rhode Island, we're the only two states that still have one single champion for boys and girls. Indiana did it for a long time, and then they just did away with it not so long ago. Indiana, Hoosierville, Hoosiers. They stopped having a single champion for boys and girls. So it's us in Rhode Island. It's always us in Rhode Island when it comes to stuff like this because, I mean, we're the two smallest states. But, yeah, I don't want Delaware to lose. I want Delaware to move forward because when I talked to Taylor Trevison when I was doing previews, he said that Delaware had to evolve at some point and get kids to be able to say, hey, you know, if you want to stay home, we got you. We can do media days. We can do these showcases. You know, we have social media presences. We have coaches that have college connects. Like, Coach Trevison was right on. The state had to evolve in that regard, yes, in terms of getting players exposure. But we don't have to change what is unique to Delaware for it to still be great. As far as the state tournament goes, that's just my humble opinion. Like, I literally would like to see a return to neutral sites because home court advantage really hasn't swayed the game too badly, but you can tell there's a difference. For those of us who grew up in the 90s and who are young adults and media professionals in the 2000s, remembering that, yeah, because I think around the 2000s is when it started being like, you know, home court advantage. But in the 90s, it was definitely from the 90s, 80s, 70s, and late 60s, it was definitely neutral sites. And that made the games more interesting. So I don't think it's fair to say that you can just give a team home court advantage because they have the better record or just because, you know, they finished higher in the point index. That's cool. I mean, you earn a seed, you earn a high seed, you earn that high seed, but at the same time, you can't just give them the entire enchilada. Like, what's the point of having a state tournament that only 2 teams will get to experience that Bob thing? Because in the earlier part of this decade, it used to be the quarterfinals with the Bob too, all day long. And I get why that has changed, because University of Delaware has their own events, and it costs money to run a state tournament. I ain't gonna lie to you. It does. So just want people to be mindful that while things change, they do stay the same in terms of, funding and resources and all of that, because it's not cheap to run a state tournament. So I get why it's going back to just the Final Four. But it should always be the Final Four. It shouldn't just be the state championship game. It should be the Final Four. Because that is something that 60 to 70 young men and women will remember for the rest of their lives. I experienced the Bob as a student twice. Howard won the state championship when I was a freshman in 1996. We lost to Seaford in the semifinals in 97 when I was a sophomore. And I just remember thinking that, because the Bob was still fresh and new at that point. The Bob is 30 years old now. It is still the premier indoor arena in the state of Delaware. Yes, we have the 76ers Fieldhouse. I did see that I mentioned it on Facebook, and someone said, move the semifinals to the Fieldhouse. And I said, that's a good idea on the surface, but the Fieldhouse only seats 2,500 max. And you're still going to have people salty that they can't get in the game because 2,500 is not 5,000. And the Bob seats a good 5. So I hope that the basketball committee, while yes, we know that resources are tight, we know that, teams with higher records and seeds, maybe want one more home game or whatever. But at the same time, you can't just take the entire state tournament and just make it like everyone else's. Because Delaware is one of the only 2 left that has this unique quality that you get 1 champion for boys, you get 1 champion for girls. You beat who's in front of you. And sometimes you have to do it in a hostile territory. And back in the day, you had to do it in a hostile territory that wasn't your own or wasn't, even close to home for a lot of teams. So I just want people to be mindful of this when we talk about, changing and evolving. We can change and evolve, absolutely, in terms of how we cover players, present their teams. Shouts out to these teams now that have social media pages, because even when I first started covering games, when I started First State Hoops Report in 2019, not everybody had a Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Most of the teams do now. So shouts out to those folks for evolving. But yes, we can evolve in the way we get players coverage and press and all of that. But as far as the nuts and bolts of the tournament, the beauty of it has always been we go into the Bob. And that's where it should stay. And that will do it, ladies and gentlemen, for this edition of Holding Court. Thank y'all for listening and watching. Greatly appreciate y'all's time. Once again, we will do this every Monday, as far as I can remember. I got to put that on my calendar. And we will talk about the week that was in basketball. We'll talk about different things like, me going off on tangents about who's in media or state tournament changes and all of that. Everything related to Delaware high school basketball, got you covered. FirstStateHoopsReport.com is the website. At FS Hoops Report is the Twitter page. First State Hoops Report is the Instagram. Facebook.com/First State Hoops Report is our Facebook page. If you have any questions, actually, I'll just go ahead and put it down there in the description so y'all can go ahead and check all of that out on your own time. I ain't going to talk my head off. But yeah, thank y'all for listening and watching. Greatly appreciate y'all's time. One last thing before I check out, for one reason or another, I may talk about that another day. But yeah, Boys and Girls Player of the Week, those nominees will be dropping soon as this video finishes. I will be finishing that up. We will also have the weekly top 10s because we have a preseason top 10. Now we're in the season. We'll start our season top 10s. Don't expect too much change. I'm not dropping teams out because they lost 1 game or 2. Or maybe the team that's won 3 or 4. We're still very early in the season. It's just too early to just start moving teams around. So don't get your hopes up. That being said, thank y'all for listening to Holding Court. See y'all at some point during the season. Now you know what I look like. If you don't know, if you didn't know before, you know now. So looking forward to seeing y'all down the line, man. Y'all take care of yourselves.